"What did you give her?" shouted the Sicilian mafia boss after she collapsed at his table. The starched white apron felt like a straitjacket, and the seams of my black uniform were already biting into my skin. It was my first shift, my first real job since I'd arrived in the city 3 weeks ago, running on fumes and the last $20 bill I'd folded into my shoe. Luca's Trattoria was not just a restaurant, it was a performance. The lighting was low and gold, making the heavy silverware on the tables glitter like treasure. Waiters moved with a silent, synchronized grace that I could only dream of. Their faces smooth and professionally blank, the air smelled like roasting garlic, old wine, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like money or power. I knew, instinctively, that I didn't belong. My name is Juliana Hart. I'm 22 years old, and I felt like I was about 100. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, a fine, persistent quiver that made the empty tray I was practicing with rattle softly. "Hart!" Matteo, the manager, snapped, his eyes flicking to my hands and then away in disgust. "You shake like that. You'll be wearing the bolognese, not serving it. Get it together. You're on station 4. Simple tables, families, tourists. Don't screw it up." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I tried to anchor myself, to focus on the simple mechanics of the job. Take the order, bring the water, smile, don't make eye contact. Especially don't make eye contact. That was the first rule I'd learned for survival, long before I ever set foot in this place. Keep your head down, stay quiet, and become invisible. I'd been doing it for almost 2 hours, and so far, I hadn't broken anything. I'd served bread to a smiling family of 4, refilled water for a couple celebrating an anniversary, and cleared plates from a table of businessmen who hadn't even noticed I was there. I was starting to breathe. Just a little. The knot in my stomach loosened by a fraction. Maybe I could do this. Then the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The low hum of conversation didn't stop, but it thinned. The waiters stood a little straighter. Matteo himself materialized near the front entrance, his usual scowl replaced with a mask of profound, almost reverent respect. A man walked in, flanked by 2 others. He didn't look at Matteo. He didn't look at anyone. He just moved through the restaurant like he was parting water, his presence sucking all the oxygen out of the air. He was tall, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it looked more like armor than clothing, dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to see everything. He took the corner booth, the one I'd been told was permanently reserved, even though it always sat empty. "Who is that?" I whispered to another waitress, Maria, as we restocked napkins at the service station. Maria didn't even look up. "That's Mr. Valente. You don't look at him, you don't talk to him, and you sure as hell don't serve him. Matteo handles that table himself, always. Domenico Dom Valente, the owner." I'd heard the whispers when I was hired, hushed rumors about who really owned Luca's. They said he was quiet, that he was feared, that he was connected to things I didn't even want to put a name to. Sicilian, a mafia boss. The words sounded ridiculous, like something from a movie. But looking at him, at the way his men sat with their backs to the wall, their eyes scanning the room, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt real, and it felt dangerous. I kept my head down, focusing on Station 4, trying to make the corner of the room vanish. Dom Valente settled into his booth. He picked up the menu but didn't read it. His eyes moved over his restaurant, a slow, appraising sweep. He owned this place. Every bottle of wine, every brick, every person drawing a paycheck. His gaze was possessive, and it missed nothing. It snagged on me. I felt it like a physical touch, a cold finger tracing my spine. I was clearing plates from table 12, my back to him, but I knew. I fumbled, a fork clattering against a plate. I froze, my heart kicking against my ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't look away. I could feel the weight of his stare. I turned slowly, keeping my head down, and chanced a glance through my eyelashes. He was watching me, not with desire, not with anger, with a kind of piercing, analytical curiosity. His brow was furrowed, just slightly. I saw his eyes flick to my hands, still trembling as I gripped the stack of plates. He saw the way my uniform hung off my frame, 2 sizes too big because I was too thin, all sharp angles and hollows. He saw the way I refused to meet his gaze. My eyes locked on the floor. Something in his expression tightened. It was unnerving. It was the look of a man who'd found a flaw in his wall, a crack in the foundation. I looked away, my face burning, and practically ran to the kitchen. Deep breaths. "Juliana," I muttered to myself, stacking the plates by the wash station. "You're invisible, and he doesn't see you." But he had, and he didn't look away. An hour later, the tension had reached a screaming pitch. "Mister." Valente was in a deep, quiet discussion with his captains. Their voices were too low to carry, but the intensity was palpable. Matteo was hovering near the service bar, sweating. "Hart!" he hissed. I jumped, nearly dropping a water pitcher. Yes, Matteo? The private table. They need another bottle of the Barolo. Sergio was supposed to take it, but he just split to the restroom, sick. Matteo's eyes were wide with panic. He looked at Maria, but she was already halfway across the room with a heavy tray. He looked back at me. You'll have to do it." My blood turned to ice. "Me? But you said night." "I don't care what I said, bah," he snapped. "It's 1 bottle of wine. Go to the bar, get the 1997. Don't run, don't talk, just pour, and get out. Now, go." My legs felt like cement. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide in the pantry, to quit, but I needed this job. Quitting meant the street, and the street was not an option. I nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the tray with the heavy, dark bottle and 4 fresh glasses. I walked toward the corner booth, each step a nightmare. The world shrank to the red gleam of the wine and the hushed, dangerous silence of the table. I reached them. The 2 captains, Leo and Marco, stopped talking. They watched me with dead, flat eyes. Dom Valente didn't look up. He was stirring his espresso, a small silver spoon making a tiny, rhythmic clink against the cup. "Mr. Valente," I whispered, my voice a dry croak. "Your wine." He glanced up. His eyes were darker than I'd realized, almost black. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Leo." The man to his left, Leo, gestured at his empty glass. "Pour." I set the tray on the edge of the table. My hands were slick with sweat. I picked up the bottle, my fingers fumbling with the heavy, foil-wrapped cork. I managed to open it, the pop sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. I lifted the bottle. I tilted it toward Leo's glass. And my wrist just gave out. A tremor, more violent than the others. Seized my hand, the bottle jerked. Red wine splashed onto the white tablecloth, a bright, arterial spray that missed Leo's suit by an inch but soaked the linen. I froze. The silence was absolute. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. I'm dead, I thought. He's going to kill me. Or they are. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be... Basta. The word was quiet, but it cut through my panic. I looked at Dom Valente. He hadn't moved. He was looking at the stain, not at me. He took a napkin and placed it over the spill, a gesture of calm, almost bored, finality. "It's just wine," he said, his voice a low rumble. He finally lifted his eyes to mine. The intensity was back, that unnerving focus. He wasn't angry. He seemed something else, puzzled. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get... "Leave it," he said. He gestured to the bottle still clutched in my white-knuckled grip. "Finish pouring, then go." Somehow, I did. My hands were numb. Moving on some distant autopilot, I filled the 4 glasses without spilling another drop. I set the bottle down. I picked up my tray. "I'm sorry," I whispered again, backing away. He was watching me, his chin resting on his hand. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He just watched me as I retreated, feeling his gaze on my back like a brand. I made it to the service station and collapsed against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. Maria rushed over. "My God, Juliana, you're white as a sheet. What did he do?" "I spilled it," I choked out. "I spilled the wine, all over the table." Maria's eyes went wide. "And you're still walking? He must be in a good mood." I didn't feel lucky. I felt marked. I tried to work, tried to fade back into the background, but the rhythm was broken. I couldn't stop thinking about those black eyes. I kept glancing at the corner table. They were talking again, the spill forgotten. But Dom Valente wasn't talking. He was looking down at the red-stained napkin, his finger tracing the edge of it, his expression thoughtful. About 30 minutes passed. I was taking a dessert order from table 9 when the dizziness hit me. It came on fast, a wave of disorientation that made the golden lights of the restaurant swim and blur. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the customer asked, his face warping in my vision. "Yes, fine," I managed to say. Just stood up too fast. But I hadn't stood up. I was just standing. A sudden, cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My stomach clenched, a sickening, rolling cramp. I hadn't eaten much all day, just nerves and coffee. But this wasn't hunger. This was wrong. I needed air. I turned away from the table, intending to go to the kitchen, to step outside. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through wet sand. The restaurant sounds, the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversation faded, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I stumbled, catching myself on the back of a chair. "Whoa, careful," a man said. I tried to nod, to apologize, but my tongue was thick, heavy in my mouth. I couldn't form the words. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog. I was losing control. I pushed off the chair, forcing my legs to move. I just had to make it to the kitchen, just a few more feet. I passed the corner booth. I was vaguely aware of the men there, their faces turning toward me as I staggered. I saw Dom Valente's head come up, his dark eyes narrowing. I tried to breathe, but my lungs wouldn't work. It felt like a band was tightening around my chest. I gasped, a small, desperate, wheezing sound. "I'm falling," I realized. The world tilted. The floor rushed up to meet me. I put my hands out, but they were useless. Clumsy things. I saw a flash of white porcelain, the dark wood of the table, and then a shocking, explosive pain as my head struck the floor. My last conscious thought was the image of Dom Valente's plate, just inches from my face, before everything went completely black. The first thing I heard was shouting. A man's voice, not just loud, but vast, a roar of absolute authority that shook the very air. "Get him in here now! Marco, front door. Leo, kitchen. Nobody leaves. Nobody!" Then, a new voice. Closer. "Boss, she's not breathing right. Pupils are pinned. This isn't a faint." "I know what it is." The first voice growled, Dom Valente. "It's an attack. Get her stable. Find out what they used." Hands were on me, rolling me over. I felt a sharp sting in my arm. My eyelids fluttered, but they were too heavy to open. The fog was thick, but I could hear the chaos I'd caused. Women screaming, chairs scraping. "What did you give her?" That voice again. Dom's. It was a terrifying sound, a predator's snarl. He wasn't asking about my welfare. He was furious, enraged. He thought someone had poisoned me. "Who served her? Who gave her a drink?" "Matteo." "Mr. Valente, I swear, I don't know." Matteo's voice was high with terror. She just fell. She's new. Maybe she has a condition, maybe drugs." "She's not on drugs," a new, calm voice said. "The medic. This is chemical, sedative, maybe something more. Her heart rate is erratic. We need to move her." "The ambulance is on its way, boss," Leo reported, his voice clipped. "No." Dom's voice was flat, final. "No hospital. Not yet. They'll finish the job there. Get the car. We're taking her to the estate, and get me the security footage from the last hour. I want to see every second." I felt myself being lifted, A strong arm slid under my knees, another under my back. I was cradled against a solid, warm chest that smelled of expensive cologne and something else, iron and ozone. I tried to protest, to say no, to tell them to leave me alone, but the darkness was pulling me back down. A heavy, suffocating blanket. The last thing I felt before I slipped away completely was the rumble of Dom Valente's voice. Not shouting this time, but a low, dangerous murmur against my ear. "You were a message, little bird. Now I'm going to find out who sent it." When I woke up, the world was silent and soft. I was lying on a bed, but it wasn't my lumpy mattress in my tiny, rented room. This was a cloud. The sheets were so fine they felt like cool water against my skin. I blinked, my eyes gritty and dry. The room was vast. The ceiling was high, crossed with dark wooden beams, a fireplace, unlit, dominated one wall, big enough to stand in. The furniture was all dark wood, heavy and ornate. It was beautiful, and it was the most terrifying place I'd ever been. I was in his house, the mafia boss. I sat up, too fast. The room spun violently, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I clamped a hand over my mouth, my body trembling. Slowly, the voice came from the shadows in the corner. I flinched, pulling the heavy comforter up to my chin. Domenico Valente was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, his legs crossed. He wasn't in his suit jacket anymore, just a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He was watching me. He had been watching me sleep. "Where am I?" I whispered. My throat felt like sandpaper. "My home. You collapsed. My doctor. He's been looking after you. I need to go." I tried to swing my legs out of the bed, but they were tangled in the sheets, and my muscles felt like wet paper. I was still wearing my black waitress uniform, minus the apron and my shoes. "You're not going anywhere," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Not until I have answers. Answers? I don't know anything. "You collapsed at my table, Juliana." He said my name, and it sounded strange in his mouth. "In my restaurant, men like me don't believe in coincidence. You were poisoned." Poisoned? The word was absurd. "No, I was dizzy. I haven't been eating. I was nervous." He stood up, and I shrank back against the headboard. He stopped, seeing my fear. He didn't come closer. "The toxicology report was inconclusive," he said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. "But my doctor found traces of an unprescribed sedative in your blood, not enough to kill a man, but enough to stop a heart in someone. Your size, or to make it look like a simple overdose. Someone wanted you to collapse, or they wanted you dead." My mind couldn't process it. But when? Who? Why? Nobody even knows me. That's what I find so interesting. He walked over to a table and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. He set it on the bedside table, still keeping his distance. "Drink." I stared at the glass, then at him. He seemed to understand. A flicker of something, annoyance, regret, crossed his face. "If I wanted you dead, Juliana, you wouldn't have woken up." I picked up the glass, my hands shaking, and took a small, cautious sip. The cool water was agony on my raw throat, but it was life. "Who touched your drink?" he asked. "My drink?" "At the restaurant, before your shift, during your break. Did you have a soda? A coffee?" I tried to think back through the fog. The day was a blur of fear and Matteo's sharp commands. I had a bottle of water from the staff fridge before the shift, and Maria, the other waitress, she gave me a cup of soda water from the bar gun, maybe an hour before. "Before you spilled wine on my table," he finished. My face flushed with shame. "Yes." "And did anyone else have access to it? Did you set it down?" I think so, at the service station, just for a minute, to grab napkins. But why would anyone... That's the question. He turned and walked to the window, looking out over a vast, dark garden. My men reviewed the security footage. No one is seen touching your glass. No one approached you who wasn't supposed to. Whatever they did, they were good." He was silent for a long moment, the only sound my own shaky breathing. "I need to go home," I pleaded, my voice small. "Please, my landlord will wonder where I am. I'll lose my job." He turned, and one corner of his mouth lifted, a smile that held no humor. "You don't have to worry about Matteo. He's been reprimanded for his lack of oversight." The coldness in his tone made my stomach clench again. "You're safe here. For now. Safer than you are out there." "Safe?" I looked around the opulent prison. "I'm not safe here. I know who you are." His expression hardened. "You know nothing. You know what they whisper. You're a child who stumbled into a war. Now I have to figure out if you're a casualty or if you're the weapon." "I'm not a weapon. I'm just a waitress." The desperation made my voice crack. Tears of frustration and terror welled in my eyes. He sighed, a sound of deep impatience. He walked back to his chair and sat down. "Think, Juliana," he commanded, his voice softer now but more intense. "Did anything seem strange today? Anyone talk to you who doesn't normally? Anything at all?" I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to replay the day, the fear, the trembling. Matteo shouting. Maria's kindness, the spill, "Wait," I whispered. He leaned forward, his focus absolute. "What?" When he told me to take the wine to your table." "What about it?" He said Sergio was supposed to do it, but he got sick. He went to the restroom, so Matteo sent me instead." Dom was very still. "Sergio," he repeated. "He was supposed to serve my table, not you." I looked at him, confused by the sudden, dangerous energy coming off him. I don't think so. I mean, I wasn't supposed to be at your table. I was just bringing the wine. Matteo serves you. He always serves you." I trailed off, a new, more terrifying thought dawning. "No," I said, shaking my head. Matteo sent me, but..." I met Dom's dark, searching gaze. "I wasn't supposed to serve your table. That's what Maria said. No one serves your table but Matteo. But he sent me." The air in the room grew thick and cold. Dom Valente stared at me, but I knew he wasn't seeing me anymore. He was seeing the restaurant, seeing his manager, seeing the pieces click into place. The sedative wasn't for me, it was for him. And I was just the girl who wasn't supposed to be there. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping on the hardwood floor. "Get some rest. There's a guard outside your door. He's there to protect you. Don't try to leave." He walked to the door, his movements fluid and precise. "Mr. Valente," I called out, my voice trembling. He paused, his hand on the ornate brass handle, his back to me. What's going to happen to me?" He was silent for a moment. "That depends," he said, his voice a low growl, "on what I find." He left, the door closing with a heavy, final click. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed in the silent room. I was alone. I was a prisoner. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I was the one in danger or if I was the one who just brought the danger down on all of them. That night, in a dark room that smelled of leather and cigar smoke, Dom Valente sat in front of a bank of high-definition monitors. He watched the security footage again. He watched Juliana enter the restaurant, her head down, a ghost in a black uniform. He watched her hands shake. He watched his own idiotic manager, Matteo, bully her. He fast-forwarded. He watched her at the service station, her back to the bar. He watched Maria hand her the soda water. He watched her take a sip and set it down. He watched the other waiters. Sergio, the man Matteo claimed was sick, was nowhere near her. He was at the other end of the restaurant. He rewound, played it again, slower this time. Juliana sets the soda water down. She turns to the napkin dispenser. She is gone for 3, maybe 4 seconds. No one approaches the glass. He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. He watched the background, a busboy clearing a nearby table, a couple walking to the restroom, and another waiter. Paolo, walking away from the service station, his back to the camera. It was nothing. He played it again. Juliana sets the glass down. Paolo is already walking away. He cursed, rubbing his eyes. This was useless. The attack was blind. He fast-forwarded again, to the moment she was assigned his table. He watched Matteo, his face pale, pushing her toward the bar. He watched her pick up the wine, and then he saw it. It was so fast, so subtle. He'd missed it 10 times. Juliana is at the bar, waiting for the bartender to pull the Barolo. Her tray is on the counter. Paolo, the same waiter from before, walks up behind her, holding his own tray, loaded with dirty glasses. He bumps into her. A tiny, accidental motion. "Scusa," Paolo muttered, his face turned away. Juliana flinched but didn't turn. Paolo set his tray down on the bar, right next to hers, for just 1 second. He adjusted the glasses on his tray, then he picked it up and walked away. But it wasn't his tray. It was Juliana's. He had left his tray of dirty glasses and taken hers, the one with the fresh glasses and the wine bottle. No. Wait. He replayed it. No. The wine bottle wasn't on the tray. The bartender handed her the bottle after. Paolo had switched the trays, the tray with the clean glasses for Dom's table. Dom zoomed in. The glasses looked identical, but they weren't. One of them, the one she would pour for Leo, the one closest to Dom, had the faintest, almost invisible smear on the rim, a residue. Paolo hadn't switched trays. He had switched a glass, in a movement so practiced it was almost invisible. He'd swapped one of the clean glasses on her tray for one he'd palmed from his own. But she didn't drink from that glass. She didn't even pour from it. She collapsed before she could. Dom rewound to the service station, the soda water. Paolo walking away. He was the only one near her. Dom leaned back, his mind racing. The sedative wasn't in the wine glass. The wine glass was a backup plan. The real attack was the soda water. Paolo had dosed her, knowing she was nervous, knowing she was drinking water. But why? Why poison her? Unless they knew Matteo, in his panic, would send the first available person, unless they knew Sergio would suddenly get sick. It wasn't an attack on him. It was an attack on her, but it was staged to look like an attack on him, to make him react, to make him look brutal or paranoid, or to make him take her. Dom stared at the screen, at the grainy image of Paolo's face as he turned, a face he'd seen 100 times, a waiter who had worked for him for 2 years. He picked up his phone. "Leo, find Paolo, bring him to me, and find out who hired him." He hung up. He looked back at the screen. At the moment Juliana fell, her body hitting the floor. "You weren't the weapon, little bird," he murmured into the darkness. "You were the bait." And he had taken it. I learned that there are different kinds of prisons. Some have iron bars and stone walls. Others have silk sheets and guards who bring you bottled water on a silver tray. For the first 2 days in Domenico Valente's house, I barely moved from the enormous bed. A quiet, older woman named Sophia brought me trays of food, broth, toast, fruit, most of which I left untouched. A doctor, a man with cold hands and eyes that held no questions, came twice a day. He'd check my blood pressure, shine a light in my eyes, and leave without a word. The guard outside my door never spoke. I was a guest, a patient, and a prisoner. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was a liability. I had seen the inside of his world, and I knew about the waiter. Paolo. I knew Dom was looking for him. I expected shouting, interrogation, threats. Instead, I got silence. The house was vast and quiet, the air still and heavy. The silence was worse than shouting. It gave me too much time to think, to remember the feeling of the floor rushing up to meet me, to see the fury in Dom's eyes. He didn't come to my room again. I was relieved, and in a way that made me sick with confusion. I was also terrified that he'd forgotten me, that I was just a piece of evidence left to rot in a guest room. On the third morning, Sophia laid out a set of simple, clean clothes, gray sweatpants and a soft t-shirt, things that were clearly expensive but held no style. They were functional, a uniform for a well-kept prisoner. "Mr. Valente will see you," she said, her voice neutral. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it, the questions, the punishment. She led me down a winding staircase of dark, polished wood, through a living area so large it looked like a hotel lobby, and into a sun-drenched breakfast room. He was there. He sat at a small, round table, a newspaper folded neatly beside his plate. He was dressed in a simple black polo shirt, his hair still damp, as if he'd just come from a workout. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes, those dark, analytical eyes, swept over me, cataloging my pale skin, the tremble in my hands, the way the borrowed clothes hung off my bones. "Sit," he said. It wasn't a request. I sat opposite him. The table was set for two. A feast was laid out between us. Eggs, bacon, a mountain of fresh fruit. Pastries still warm from the oven. My stomach, which had been a tight knot of acid for days, clenched with a sharp, sudden hunger. He pushed a plate toward me. "Eat. Juliana, you look like a ghost." I picked up a fork, but my hand was shaking too badly. I put it down and folded my hands in my lap, trying to hide the tremor. What happened to Paolo?" I whispered. "The waiter." Dom didn't look up from his coffee. "He's gone." "Gone? Like fired?" "Like he vanished," Dom said, his voice flat. "His apartment is empty. His car is gone. He was paid well to drug you, and he was smart enough to run before his employers decided to clean up the loose end, or before I did." I flinched. "So? It was for me, the poison?" "It seems so." He set his cup down, the small click of porcelain on a saucer echoing in the silence. Which brings us back to the question, why? "I told you, I don't know anyone." "You do," he countered, his voice dangerously soft. "You just won't say who. Eat." This time, I obeyed. I picked up a piece of melon and ate it, the sweetness feeling foreign on my tongue. I was terrified, but the hunger was a more immediate, primal need. We ate in silence for a few minutes. I kept my head down, focusing on the food, feeling his gaze on me. He wasn't eating. He was watching. I reached for the coffee pot. My hand was still unsteady, and as I gripped the handle, the loose sleeve of the t-shirt slid back, exposing my wrist. A map of old bruises, yellow and green, marbled the pale skin just above the bone. His movement was so fast I didn't register it until his fingers were on me. He didn't grab me. He simply laid his hand over my wrist, his thumb gently tracing the edge of the largest bruise. His touch was warm, the pressure firm, and it sent a jolt of pure, cold panic through my veins. I tried to pull my arm back, but his grip tightened, not painfully, just immovably. "That's not from the fall in my restaurant," he stated. The lie was automatic, practiced. "I fell a few weeks ago at my apartment on the stairs. I'm clumsy." He lifted his eyes to mine. He didn't call me a liar. He didn't have to. His gaze was heavy, filled with a certainty that stripped me bare. He knew the shape of a lie. He probably lived on them. "You're a terrible liar, Juliana," he said, his voice quiet. He let go of my wrist. I snatched my hand back, pulling the sleeve down, my skin burning where he'd touched me. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I want you to tell me who you're running from." I can't," he sighed, a sound of deep impatience. He pushed his plate away. "My lawyer spent the last 2 days looking for you. He found you, and he found nothing." "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's the problem. You have no criminal record. You also have no credit history, no driving record, no family listed, living or dead. Your Social Security number was issued 6 months ago. You were born. According to the United States government last spring, you're a ghost, Juliana. And ghosts don't just appear. They're made." I couldn't breathe. He knew. He'd pulled the one thread I couldn't protect. I needed a fresh start. I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I left a bad situation. I needed to disappear, so I paid someone for the new name, the new number. I just wanted to be left alone. You picked the wrong city for that, and you picked the wrong restaurant. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. The casual posture was deceptive. He looked like a panther about to spring. I have a rival, someone who wants to test my territory. My consigliere believes they arranged the incident at Luca's. They poisoned you, a nobody, knowing you'd collapse at my table. They wanted to frame you as an assassin, or maybe just to see what I'd do, to see if I was merciful, or if I was still the man who would burn a building down for an insult. They wanted you to kill me. I realized, the horror of it settling in my stomach like cold stones. Or they wanted me to show weakness. His eyes were hard. Either way, you were the bait, and now you're in my house, which means you and whoever you're running from are now my problem. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who did this to you? He tapped his own wrist, where my bruise had been. I looked at his dark, intense face, at the raw power he held so easily. If I told him, if I said the name, I knew he would go to war. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he would lose. The man I was running from didn't just own territory. He owned people. I can't, I said, my voice breaking. If I tell you, he'll kill you, and then he'll kill me. I came here to find someone. I offered a half-truth to appease him. Someone I lost. That's all. I wasn't looking for trouble. Dom studied me for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. All right, he said, standing up. You're a bad liar, but you're good at holding secrets. I respect that. But my protection isn't a suggestion. It's a rule. And in this house, you follow my rules. For the next week, he began my education. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He taught. He would have me sit in his study, a room lined with books from floor to ceiling, while he took his meetings. His men would come in, speak in low, coded sentences, and he would give orders that were calm, precise, and absolute. He was teaching me his world. There are two things in my life. Juliana, he told me one afternoon, as we stood by the massive window overlooking his gardens. Loyalty and silence. One without the other is useless. A man who is loyal but talks too much is a liability. A man who is silent but not loyal is a snake. I demand both. Why are you telling me this? Because you are living under my roof. You are eating my food. That makes you, for now, part of my family. And my family is loyal, and they are silent. It was a warning and a promise. He was protecting me, but he was also binding me to him. The endless, opulent boredom was starting to drive me insane. I wasn't allowed a phone. The televisions were never on. I spent my days reading books from his library and pacing the confines of my room. One evening, I found him in the kitchen. It was Sophia's night off, and he was standing in front of an open refrigerator, staring into it with the perplexed look of a man who had never had to feed himself. I can cook, I said, my voice startling him. He turned. What? I can cook. If you'll let me, I need to do something with my hands. He hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing to the kitchen. Be my guest. It was the first time I'd felt a flicker of control in weeks. The kitchen was magnificent, a professional-grade expanse of stainless steel and marble. I found tomatoes, garlic, basil, onions. I found pasta. I set to work. The familiar, rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board, a meditation. I lost myself in the work. I chopped, I sautéed, I stirred. The smell of garlic and simmering tomatoes filled the sterile air, making the room feel, for the first time, like a home. Dom sat at the massive kitchen island, watching me. He didn't talk. He just watched my hands as I worked, his expression thoughtful. I made a simple pasta al pomodoro, a salad, and garlic bread. I served him a plate at the island, then made one for myself, sitting at the other end. We ate. The silence, this time, was different. It wasn't tense. It was shared. "It's good," he said, surprising me. "Very good. Where did you learn?" "My mother," I said, the words thick. It was the first time I'd spoken of her in months. She believed food was the only thing that could fix a bad day. She was a smart woman. He took another bite. We finished the meal, the silence stretching, comfortable. I felt a strange, dangerous warmth spreading through my chest. It was the most normal 30 minutes I'd had in years. I stood to clear the plates. I gathered the cutting board, the bowls, and the heavy saucepan I'd used for the sauce. I was still weak, my muscles shaky from days of inactivity. As I turned toward the sink, the heavy pan, still slick with olive oil, slipped from my grasp. It hit the terracotta tile floor with a deafening, violent clang. I didn't scream. I reacted. Instinct, honed by years of terror, took over my body. I dropped to my knees, my arms flying up to cover my head and neck, my body curling into a tight ball. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable, the shout, the kick, the blow. I was shaking, my teeth chattering. I'm sorry, I'm clumsy. I'll clean it. I'm sorry." The blow never came. There was only a ringing silence, more terrifying than the crash. Slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I peeked through my arms. Dom was on his feet. He hadn't moved toward me. He was standing exactly where he'd been. His hands clenched at his sides, his knuckles white, his face was pale. His jaw set so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. The fury I'd seen in his eyes at the restaurant was back, but magnified 1,000 times. It was a cold, black, murderous rage. And it wasn't directed at me. "Who?" he said, his voice a lethal, barely there whisper that cut through the room. "Taught you to do that." I was paralyzed, still huddled on the floor. I just dropped it. I'm sorry." "Get up, Juliana." His voice was rough, a command that vibrated with barely leashed violence. I flinched, scrambling to my feet, backing away until my back hit the cabinets. He took a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes closed. He looked like a man fighting for control, and it terrified me. He opened his eyes. The rage was still there, but it was banked, aimed past me, at a ghost. "No one," he said, his voice strained, "in this house will ever raise a hand to you. Not me, not my men, not anyone. Do you understand me?" I could only nod, my throat locked in a knot of tears. He stared at me for another second, then turned and stalked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the shattered pan and the smell of tomatoes. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. I cleaned up the mess, my hands shaking so badly I cut my finger on a shard of my own plate. I was in my room, huddled under the covers, when a soft knock came at the door. I froze. He never knocked. "Come in," I whispered. Dom entered. He wasn't in his polo shirt. He was in a fresh suit, dark and immaculate. He held a long, flat box from a high-end designer. He set it on the bed. "You can't live in sweatpants," he said, his voice gruff, the anger from the kitchen gone, replaced by a strained formality. I opened the box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a dress. It was simple. A deep sapphire blue, made of a soft, heavy silk that felt like water in my hands. It was beautiful, and it probably cost more than I'd made in the last year. I can't accept this. It's not a gift. Juliana, it's a requirement. I'm tired of being cooped up in this house." He gestured to the door. "Put it on. Join me on the balcony. I want to show you something." I did as I was told. The dress fit perfectly, clinging to my body in a way that made me feel exposed, but also solid, human. He was waiting on a vast stone balcony that wrapped around the side of the house. The night air was cool, and the view took my breath away. His estate was high on a hill, overlooking the entire city. The lights glittered below us, a carpet of diamonds stretching to the dark horizon. "This is what I protect," he said, not looking at me, his hands resting on the stone railing. "Every light, every street, it's mine. My father built it. His father built it. I won't let anyone, rival or ghost, threaten it." "It's beautiful," I whispered, standing beside him, but not too close. "Thank you," I said, "for the dress." "It's just a dress." We stood in silence, the city breathing beneath us. The tension that had been a low hum since I arrived began to build. It was no longer just fear. He was my captor, my protector, and the only person I'd spoken to in over a week. He was dangerous, but he was also the man who had looked at my bruises and gotten angry for me. He turned his head, his gaze settling on my face. "You look better. The color is back in your cheeks." "I feel better." His hand moved, covering mine where it rested on the cold stone. His skin was warm, his touch firm. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't rough. It was possessive. My heart gave a painful, confused lurch. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, a slow, deliberate circle. I should have pulled away. I should have been terrified, but I just froze. "Juliana," he murmured. He turned, his body angling toward mine. The air between us was electric, charged with his power and my fear, and something else, a loneliness I recognized because I saw it in myself. His eyes dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. He leaned in. It was slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to flee. And I did. The panic, the memory of him, of Raymond, flooded my senses. I ripped my hand from under his and took a stumbling step back, my breath catching in a sob. "Please," I choked out. "I can't. Don't." Dom stopped. He didn't look angry. Looked pained. He clenched his jaw, the muscle ticking again. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face, seeing the raw, unadulterated terror I couldn't hide. He nodded once, a sharp, curt motion. He turned back to the city, his shoulders rigid. "Go to bed, Juliana," he said, his voice flat and cold. The night, the city lights, the man. All of it was shut off from me again. I fled. That night, the terror I'd held back finally broke free. I heard voices from downstairs. Long after I'd gone to my room, Dom and another man. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the heavy wood. A test, Domenico, I'm telling you," the other man, older, was saying. "The Corsa family, they're moving north. They put the sedative in the girl's drink. They wanted you to find it. They wanted to frame her. See if you'd kill an innocent girl to protect yourself. To see if you were still your father's son. Or they wanted to see if you'd take her in. See if you were soft." "They will find out I am not soft, Antonio," Dom's voice rumbled, cold as the grave. "This was a mistake. They've shown their hand." I crept back to bed, shaking, a pawn. I was just a pawn in their game. The Corsas. The name meant nothing to me. But another name did. I fell into a restless, twitching sleep, and the dreams came for me. I wasn't in the silk sheets. I was back in the damp, cold room, the one with the single bulb and the deadbolt on the outside. I could smell the stale cigars, the sour whiskey. I could hear his voice, smooth as oil, whispering my name. "You thought you could leave me. Juliana. You thought you could run." The door handle rattled. Click. I bolted upright in the massive bed, a scream tearing from my throat, raw and animalistic. "No, no, please, Raymond, get off me, Raymond!" The door to my bedroom slammed open, crashing against the wall. The guard was there, his gun drawn, but Dom was faster. He shoved past the man, his eyes wild. "Get out!" he roared at the guard, who vanished, pulling the door closed. Dom was at my bedside in 2 strides. I was hyperventilating, tangled in the sheets, my nails digging into my own arms. I was still screaming. "Juliana!" He gripped my shoulders. I recoiled, lashing out, my hand connecting with his chest. "Don't touch me! Get away! Don't touch me!" I scrambled to the headboard, pulling my knees to my chest, a sobbing, terrified mess. I wasn't seeing him, I was seeing him. Dom stopped. He held his hands up, palms out, showing me he was unarmed. "You're safe," he said, his voice low and rough, trying to cut through my panic. "You're in my house. It was a dream. Look at me. Juliana, you're here." He sat on the edge of the bed, a safe distance away. He didn't move. He just sat, a solid, unmoving anchor in the storm that was ripping me apart. "He's not here," he said, his voice a low rumble. "No one can get to you here." My sobs slowly began to subside, the adrenaline fading, leaving me cold and empty. The shaking didn't stop, but the screams did. I looked at him through my tear-soaked eyelashes. He was just watching me, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes were burning with that same dark fury from the kitchen. "It wasn't a dream," I whispered, the admission tearing me apart. "He's real." I was so cold. I was freezing, the trauma leaching all the warmth from my body. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I was moved by a desperate, primal need for protection, for warmth. I lunged forward, not like I had on the balcony, but like a child seeking shelter. I buried my face in the hard warmth of his chest, my hands fisting in his shirt. I pressed myself against him, trying to absorb his strength, trying to hide from the ghosts in the room. Dom went rigid. He was stone. For 10 long, agonizing seconds, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, as if afraid I might break, his arms came around me. One hand spread wide across my back, holding me steady. The other came up to cradle the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my hair, pressing my face tighter against his shirt. He didn't speak. He didn't stroke my back or offer empty platitudes. He just held me. He held me as I cried, silent, broken sobs against his chest. He held me as the shaking finally eased. He was a mountain, a wall. He was my captor, a monster who dealt in loyalty and silence. And he was the only thing in the world that felt safe. He didn't let go. He sat there, a solid, breathing shield, and held me until the first gray, watery light of dawn began to creep through the curtains. The morning after the nightmare, I woke up alone. For a disorienting second, I thought I'd dreamed it all. The scream, the terror, the solid, unmoving warmth of Dom holding me until dawn. But the sheets on the other side of the bed were rumpled, and the air still held the faint, masculine scent of his cologne. He hadn't just held me. He had stayed. He was in his study when I finally emerged, dressed in another set of the simple, comfortable clothes Sophia had left for me. The guard at my door, a different man, simply nodded as I passed, his eyes following me. I was no longer just a prisoner. I was something else, something under observation. Dom was on the phone, his back to me. His voice was a low, dangerous command. "I don't care that he's dead," he said, his voice stripped of all emotion. "Check again, Raymond Corsa. Find his ghost. Find who's using his name." He hung up without saying goodbye and turned to me. His face was a mask of cold control, but his eyes were different. The clinical curiosity was gone, replaced by a dark, possessive intensity. He was looking at me, really looking at me, as if trying to solve a puzzle that had just become infinitely more complex. "Raymond," he stated. It wasn't a question. I flinched, my hand instinctively going to my throat. It was a nightmare. "Raymond Corsa," he continued, ignoring my deflection, "was a rival of my father's, a snake who dealt in filth, human trafficking. He built an empire on owning people. He was supposed to have been killed in a car bomb almost 15 years ago. It seems someone has taken up his mantle." My blood ran cold. "Corsa, the ones who poisoned me?" "The same," he said, his eyes narrowing. "They're testing my territory, and now I have their name, thanks to you." He didn't thank me. He stated it like a fact. I had been a liability. Now I was, perhaps, an asset. "What do you know about him, Juliana?" "Nothing," I lied, the word coming out too fast. I don't know that name. The man in my dream. He's just a man." He watched me, his gaze so piercing I felt he could see the truth branded on my soul. He knew I was lying, and he knew I was terrified. "All right," he said, letting it go. "For now. Sophia is in the kitchen. Go, eat." I fled to the kitchen, to the only place in the house where I felt a sliver of peace. Sophia, the quiet housekeeper, was kneading dough, her movements practiced and strong. She looked up as I entered and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Mister, Valente has requested you dine with him tonight. Here, not in your room." It was a promotion, from patient to something else. "Okay," I whispered. I moved to the sink, picking up a vegetable brush. Can I help with the dough?" Sophia hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the door, as if expecting Dom to appear and reprimand her. But she just pushed a small bowl of flour toward me. "You can peel the potatoes for the gnocchi, if your hands are steady." My hands were, for the first time in as long as I could remember, almost steady. I started to carve out a new existence, a strange twilight life within the fortress. I spent my mornings in the library, my afternoons in the kitchen. I learned Sophia's rhythms. I learned the names of the two guards, Marco and Leo, who were Dom's constant shadows. They were his captains, his most trusted men. They did not trust me? I saw them watching me when I walked in the garden, a privilege Dom had granted me, though always with a guard 20 paces behind. I saw the way they looked at Dom when he spoke to me. One afternoon, I was in the study, reading. Dom was at his desk, and Leo entered without knocking, his face grim. "Boss," he said, nodding at me, a clear dismissal. "She stays," Dom said, not looking up from his ledger. Leo's jaw tightened. He was a broad, tough man, his face a map of old scars. "We have a problem. The courses are moving product through our ports. They're getting bold, and it all started when she showed up. She is a victim in this. Leo, not a participant." "She's a ghost, boss," Leo insisted, his voice a low, urgent rasp. "I ran the name you gave me. Raymond, this ghost, Juliana. Ghosts come with stories, bad ones. She's a magnet. She's bringing this heat down on us. She's a weakness." The silence in the room was absolute. I stopped breathing. Dom slowly lifted his head. His eyes were flat, dead. "She's under my protection. That makes her mine. She's not a weakness. She is a clarification, a way to see who my real enemies are." "And your men? What do we tell them? That you're distracted?" Dom stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move quickly. But the power that rolled off him was a physical force, pressing the air from the room. "You will tell my men," he said, his voice a lethal purr, "that I am handling the Corsa problem, and you will remind them what happens to anyone who questions my judgment or who disrespects my guest." Leo held his gaze for a long, defiant second, then his eyes dropped. "Yes, boss." "You're dismissed." Leo left, his shoulders rigid with resentment. I was shaking. "He's right," I whispered, closing the book. "I should go. I'm putting you in danger. I'll just disappear again." "No," Dom said. The word was final. He walked over to my chair, and I had to crane my neck to look up at him. "You can't run from this. They found you once. They'll find you again. Their mistake wasn't poisoning you. Their mistake was doing it at my table. Now, they have my attention." He was using me. I was his bait, his excuse to go to war. I should have been terrified, but all I felt was a dark, terrible, and profound sense of relief. He wasn't going to let me go. That night, dinner was not the simple meal I'd cooked in the kitchen. Sophia served us in the cavernous, formal dining room, under a crystal chandelier that dripped light onto the polished table. We were at opposite ends, separated by 30 feet of gleaming mahogany. It was absurd, a parody of intimacy. "This is ridiculous," Dom said, his voice echoing in the space. He stood, picked up his plate and his wine, and walked to the chair directly beside mine. He sat, The sudden proximity was overwhelming. I could smell the sharp, clean scent of his soap, see the fine lines around his eyes. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The tension was back, but it was different. It wasn't the fear from the balcony or the panic of the nightmare. It was a low, vibrating hum, a string pulled taut between us. "You've been in my house for 11 days. Juliana," he said, setting his fork down. "You work in my kitchen, you sleep in my bed, you've screamed a man's name in my arms, and I still don't know who you are." I'm just Juliana." "Stop lying," he said, not with anger, but with a sudden, weary sadness. "The lies, they're like a wall. I can't protect you if I can't see what's behind it. Tell me what he did to you." The question was so direct, so simple. He hadn't asked who, he'd asked what. I looked down at my plate. The gnocchi I had helped make blurred through my tears. "He didn't just hurt me," I whispered, the confession torn from my throat. He owns people. That's what he does. He finds girls who have no one, who are invisible, and he makes them his. You don't just work for him, you belong to him, you're his property." I lifted my eyes to his. "I ran away, and you can't run away from a man like that. He doesn't let his property go. Ever." Dom stared at me, his face carved from stone. The fury was back, the cold, controlled rage I'd seen in the kitchen. "I am not his property," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I'm not. I'd rather die than go back." "You won't die," Dom said, his voice a rough promise, "and you will never go back." He reached out, his hand covering mine on the table. It was the same gesture from the balcony, the same possessive warmth. But this time, I didn't pull away. I was so tired of running. I turned my hand over, my small, pale fingers lacing with his strong, darker ones. His thumb stroked my palm, a slow, mesmerizing circle that sent a shiver through my entire body. We just sat there, our hands locked together on the table, the food forgotten. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I know," he said. After dinner, he led me to his study. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, but handed me neither. He just held one, swirling the amber liquid, and set the other on his desk. He stood by the cold fireplace, watching me. "That night on the balcony," he said, "you were afraid of me." "I was afraid of him, of what he made me." "And now?" I walked toward him, my body moving with a will of its own, drawn by the gravity of his protection. "Now," I said, stopping just in front of him, "I'm just afraid." "Good," he murmured. "You should be, but not of me." He reached out, his hand coming up to my face. His knuckles were rough, his touch surprisingly gentle as he traced my jaw. My breath hitched. I should have flinched. I should have run. I leaned into his touch, my eyes closing. "Juliana," he breathed, his voice thick. His other hand came up, cupping my face, his thumb stroking my cheekbones. I opened my eyes. He was looking at me with a raw, desperate hunger that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with possession. He wanted to own what Raymond had tried to steal. He lowered his head, his lips brushed mine, a hesitant, trembling question. It wasn't a kiss of fire. It was a kiss of finding purchase in a storm, a grounding. I tasted the brandy on his mouth, sharp and warm. I didn't kiss him back, but I didn't pull away. I just let him. I let him anchor me. He pulled back, just an inch, his eyes searching mine, asking for the permission he was too proud to request. And my fear, which had been my constant companion for years, finally, blessedly, gave way to something else. A yearning, a desperate, aching need to feel something other than terror, to feel wanted, to feel safe. I was the one who moved that last inch. My hand came up, my fingers, which had only ever shaken in fear, surprisingly steady as they rested on the hard muscle of his chest. I rose on my toes and pressed my mouth to his. It was slow and hesitant and emotionally raw. It was clumsy. It was two broken, jagged pieces trying to fit together. His mouth softened against mine, and the kiss deepened. No longer a question, but an answer. A groan rumbled deep in his chest, and his arms wrapped around me, one hand sliding down to the small of my back, pulling me against him. I was crushed against the solid wall of his body. I could feel the frantic, heavy beat of his heart matching my own. He wasn't the gentle, hesitant man from a second ago. This was the man who had roared in the restaurant, the man who had promised to protect me. This was all his control, all his power, focused on me. I whimpered, a sound of both fear and surrender. He broke the kiss, his forehead resting against mine, his breathing ragged, his eyes were black, the pupils blown wide. "You're sure?" he whispered, his voice rough. I couldn't speak, I just nodded. He didn't hesitate. He swept me into his arms, one arm under my knees, the other around my back. I weighed nothing to him. I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face against his shoulder, my heart hammering. He carried me out of the study, up the grand staircase. He didn't take me to my room. He took me to his bedroom was dark, the curtains drawn, the only light coming from the moon filtering through a gap. It was stark, masculine, and smelled of him. He laid me on the massive bed, the comforter cool against my skin. He stood over me for a second, just looking, his chest rising and falling. He was a shadow, a predator, my protector. And I wasn't afraid. This wasn't the blind, animal panic of my nightmares. This wasn't a man taking, this was a deliberate, trembling choice. He slowly unbuttoned his shirt, his eyes never leaving mine. I watched his hands, strong, scarred hands that had ordered men to their deaths, that had held me while I cried. He came down onto the bed, bracing his weight on his elbows, caging me in. He didn't kiss me. He just looked at me, his gaze tracing every feature of my face. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his voice thick with a control that was clearly costing him. "Tell me no, and I will." "Don't stop," I whispered. He lowered his head, his lips tracing a line from my temple, down my cheek, to the hollow of my throat. His touch was electric, a fire that didn't burn, but warmed. It chased the cold from my bones, the cold that had lived there for years. My fear was still present, a ghost in the corner of the room, but my yearning for this connection, for this all-consuming safety, was finally stronger. I reached up, my fingers tangling in his dark hair, and pulled his mouth back to mine. It was a reclamation. It was a desperate, silent promise. It was the first night in my adult life that I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I would not have a nightmare. When I woke, I was tangled in his arms, his breathing a slow, even rhythm against my ear. The sun was streaming through the curtains he'd left open, and for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't cold. The house changed after that. I was no longer a guest. I was an occupant. I dined at his table for every meal. Sophia no longer looked at me with wary politeness. She looked at me with a quiet, knowing respect. The men, however, were a different story. The gossip was immediate. Dom, who was known to have women but never a woman, had called off all his arrangements. He was seen by his staff, having coffee with me in the garden. He was heard by his men, ending a call with an underling because I had walked into the room. He didn't care. He protected what was his, and I was, in every unspoken way, his. The safety I felt was a bubble, fragile and iridescent. I knew it couldn't last. The Corsa threat was still out there, a shadow waiting to fall. It fell 3 days later. I was in my old room. I had kept it, needing a space that was just mine when Sophia knocked. "Juliana," she said, her face pale, "this was left for you, on the front hall table." She handed me a simple, white, unmarked envelope. "Who left it?" "No one saw," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It just appeared." A breach. Someone had gotten inside. My hands were shaking again, The old, familiar tremor. I tore it open. It wasn't a letter. It was a photograph. A candid shot, taken from a distance. It was me, standing on the balcony, in the blue dress Dom had given me. The city lights glittered behind me. It was the night I had rejected him, the night before the nightmare. A thick red X was drawn over my face. I dropped it as if it were on fire. Dom was in his study, in a meeting with Leo and Marco. I didn't knock. I burst in. The photo clutched in my hand. "Juliana," Leo barked, standing. "The boss is busy." I ignored him. My eyes locked on Dom. I walked to his desk and slammed the photo down. Dom looked at it. His face, which had been relaxed in his meeting, turned to granite. He picked up the photo, his expression darkening into a storm I hadn't seen yet. "Where?" he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "On the hall table. Sophia just found it." He looked at Leo, his eyes black with a cold, murderous fury. "A breach in my house." "Boss, Leo was pale. "Lock it down," Dom roared, all pretense of calm gone. "Every door, every window, double the perimeter. I want the staff questioned. I want the footage from every camera on this property reviewed, frame by frame. Find out who got in. Find them, now." Leo and Marco scrambled from the room, shouting into their radios. Dom was still staring at the photo, his thumb rubbing the red X as if he could wipe it away. "They're not just testing you," I said, my voice shaking. "They're telling you they can get to me. They're telling you that your protection is worthless." "No one," he said, "is worthless, and no one is getting to you." The phone on his desk rang, a shrill, demanding sound. He snatched it up. "What?" He listened, his body going rigid. "Alive? You're certain?" He was silent for a moment. "I see it, thank you. Antonio." He hung up the phone, his movements slow, deliberate. "That was my consigliere," he said, his voice flat. "It wasn't a car bomb. 15 years ago. It was a decoy. Raymond Corsa is alive. He's back. He's been operating in the shadows for a decade, and he just made his first public move. Against you." The air left my lungs. He was alive. The ghost was real. "Dom," I whispered, sinking into the chair opposite him. "You don't understand." "I understand that he put a target on your back." "No, you don't know who he is. What he is." I was sobbing now, the terror I'd held back breaking free. I didn't just run from him, I escaped. 2 months ago, I was his favorite. I was locked in a room for almost 2 years. Dom's face was ashen. He marks his property. Dom. The words were the most painful I'd ever spoken. So they can never leave, so everyone knows who they belong to. I stood, my back to him. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely grip the hem of my shirt. He told me if I ever ran, he'd find me, and he'd kill the man I ran to. "Juliana." "He branded me." I choked out. I pulled the fabric of my shirt up, exposing the skin of my lower back, just above my hip. There, healed but still angry red against my pale skin, was the scar. It was a stylized, intricate RC. I heard him stand, the scrape of his chair a violent sound in the silent room. I felt his presence behind me, the heat of his body, but he didn't touch me. I heard him take a single, ragged breath. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated hatred. I let the shirt fall, turning to face him. His face was a mask of such cold, pale fury that I took a step back. He wasn't the man who had held me. He wasn't the man who had kissed me. This was the monster his men whispered about. This was Domenico Valente. "I have to go," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "Don't you see? He'll kill you. He'll destroy everything you've built just to get me back. Please, Dom, let me run. I'm good at it. I can disappear." He looked at me, his eyes black, bottomless pits of violence. He was quiet for a long, terrible moment. He finally spoke, his voice not a roar, but a dead, flat, terrifying whisper. A vow. "He touched you." He turned away from me, walking to the window to look out over the city he owned. "He dies. The vow he'd made, He dies, hung in the air for days. It was a poison, a promise, and a death sentence. The house, once a silent, opulent prison, transformed into a fortress. It became a war room. The quiet, heavy presence of guards in dark suits multiplied. They were no longer just on the perimeter. They were in the halls, at the top of the stairs, their faces grim, their hands never far from their jackets. The air was thick with the metallic tang of unspent adrenaline and the low murmur of men speaking in clipped, serious tones. Dom was a ghost. He was there, a thundercloud of controlled fury, but he was also gone, lost in a world of maps, phone calls, and hushed, angry meetings in his study. I would see him through the cracked door, standing over his desk with Leo and Marco, his captains. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie was gone, and he was pointing at lists of names I couldn't read. He was gathering his army. He was ordering a full investigation into Raymond Corsa, where he was, who was protecting him, who dealt for him. He was methodically, patiently, and terrifyingly planning to tear a man's world apart. And it was all for me. I felt like the eye of a hurricane. The world was spinning into violence around me, but I was in this strange, terrifying calm, making gnocchi with Sophia in the kitchen, the rhythmic thud of my knife on the board, the only sound I could control. "He's going to get himself killed," I whispered to her one afternoon, my hands white-knuckled on the knife. "This man, Corsa, you don't just find him. He's not a man. He's a network. He's a disease." Sophia didn't look up from the sauce she was stirring. "The boss knows what he is doing. He's protecting his family." "I'm not his family. Sophia, I'm the one who brought this to his door." "It was at his door long before you arrived," she said, her voice firm. "The Corsas have been a thorn in the Valente side for a generation. You just gave Mr. Valente a reason to finally pull the thorn out." Her words didn't comfort me. They terrified me. I wasn't the cause. I was the excuse. I waited for him that night. He came out of the study long after midnight, his face gray with exhaustion, his shoulders slumped. He looked, for a second, not like a monster, but just like a man carrying an impossible weight. "Dom," I said, my voice small in the vast dark hallway. He stopped, his head coming up. He hadn't known I was there. "Juliana, you should be in bed." "So should you." I walked toward him, my hands twisting in front of me. I heard the meeting. I hear the guards. I see the guns. You're going to war." "I am ending a problem," he said, his voice flat. "By starting a war, you can't win. Not for me. I'm not worth it. I'm not worth your life or Leo's or any of your men. Please, just let me go. Give me a car, some money. I'll drive south. I'll go to Mexico. He'll never find me, and he'll leave you alone." He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "I don't want this," I pleaded, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. Hot and desperate. "I don't want you to become a monster to save me." The words hung in the air between us. He looked at me, and the exhaustion on his face was replaced by a deep, profound sadness that cracked my heart open. He took a step, closing the distance between us, and cupped my face in his hands. His palms were rough, calloused, but his touch was so gentle I thought I would break. "Juliana," he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. "I already was one." He brushed the tears from my cheeks with his thumbs. "I've been a monster since I was 19 years old. I've done things you can't imagine. To protect what my father built. I've lived in the dark for so long. I forgot what the light looked like." His eyes searched mine, the dark intensity pulling me in. You just made me want to be something else." My breath hitched. This was a confession. This was the truth. More raw and real than the scar on my back. He wasn't doing this for me. He was doing this because of me. I leaned my head into his touch, my hands coming up to rest on his forearms. "He'll kill you, Dom. He'll try." His hand slid from my face, down my arms, his fingers lacing with mine. "He branded you. Juliana, he put his mark on you. He thinks he owns you. I will burn his entire world to the ground, and I will scatter the ashes. and then I will show him what it means to touch what is mine." He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me, and I buried my face in his chest. I was home. It was the most dangerous, most terrifying, and most complete feeling of safety I had ever known. He led me upstairs, not to my room, but to his. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear. There was just a deep, mutual, and aching need. The night we had shared before had been a discovery, a hesitant question. This was a promise. He stood in the center of the room, and I walked to him. He didn't reach for me. He waited. He was giving me all the power, letting me set the terms. My hands, which had once trembled so badly I couldn't pour a glass of wine, came up to his face. I traced the strong line of his jaw, the faint stubble that scraped my fingertips. He closed his eyes, his breathing shaky. "You're not a monster," I whispered, my thumb brushing his lower lip. "You're just you." I rose on my toes and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss from the study. It was slow. It was deep. It was trust. It was me, finally choosing. I was reclaiming my body, my desires, my life, and I was giving them to him. Not because he was strong, but because he had seen my weakness and called it strength. His hands found my waist, his grip firm, grounding me. He didn't push, he didn't pull, he just held me, a silent anchor, letting me lead. The kiss deepened, and I felt a tremor run through his entire body. It was the tremor of a man holding back an ocean of power, terrified of breaking the one fragile thing he'd allowed himself to care about. I pulled back, just enough to see his eyes. They were dark with a desire that was so entwined with reverence. It made me weak. I took his hand and led him to the bed. Every movement was mine. I sat, and I pulled him down with me. I unbuttoned his shirt, my fingers slow and deliberate. My eyes locked on his. He just watched me, his face a mask of pained, beautiful restraint. This wasn't a night of passion in the way the world understood it. It was a night of healing. Every touch was a silent vow. My hands on his chest were a promise. "I trust you." His lips on my throat were an answer. "I will protect you." When we came together, it was a quiet collision of two people who had been alone for too long. It was slow and tender, and it was filled with a mutual, desperate need to be seen. His hands on my skin, his voice murmuring my name. It wasn't an act of possession, it was an act of worship. And in his arms, I wasn't the branded, broken girl who had cowered on the kitchen floor. I was whole. I was safe. I was his. The peace lasted for 2 days. Then, the traitor was found. I was in the garden when I heard the commotion. Dom had been locked in his study all morning with Leo and Antonio, his elderly, sharp-eyed consigliere. The meeting ended abruptly. The doors to the study slammed open. "Get Sal!" Dom's voice roared, echoing through the house. It was the voice from the restaurant, the voice of the boss. "Bring him to my study, now, and bring Marco. I want all my captains here." I hurried inside, my heart hammering. Sophia grabbed my arm in the hall, her face ashen. "Stay in the kitchen, Juliana. This is not for you." But I couldn't. I had to know. I crept down the hall, hiding in the alcove near the study doors, which had been left ajar. I could see inside. Dom was behind his desk. He looked calm. It was a terrifying, absolute calm. Leo and Marco stood against the wall, their faces like stone. 2 guards brought in Sal. He was one of Dom's lieutenants, a younger man, ambitious, with slick hair and a sharp suit. I'd seen him here before. He looked confused, but not yet scared. "Boss, you wanted to see me?" Sal said, trying for casual. "Close the doors," Dom said. The guards shut the doors, leaving the 5 of them inside. I was left in the hall, my ear pressed to the wood, my blood frozen in my veins. "You've been with my family for 10 years, Salvatore," Dom's voice began, conversational. "Yes, boss, since I was 18. And in 10 years, you've done well. I gave you territory. I gave you my trust. I treated you like a brother. You did, boss, and I'm loyal. You know that. There was a sound, a heavy, metallic thud. Dom had placed something on the desk. Then, explain this, Dom said. Explain the wire transfers to an offshore account, an account that, my consigliere has discovered, is owned by a shell corporation. A shell corporation owned by Raymond Corsa. The silence was absolute. I heard Sal's breathing hitch. Boss, I don't know, it's a mistake. You were what? Dom's voice was silk, and it was poison. You were buying property? No, you were selling it. You were selling me. You offered him access. You told him about my routines. You brokered a deal. You would get him close to me, and in exchange, you would get my territory when I was gone. No, Dom, please, he came to me. He threatened me, my family, my kids. You do not have kids, Sal. Dom's voice was ice. And you do not have a family. Not anymore. You broke the 2 rules, loyalty and silence. You are a snake. And you did it all for territory. For money. Please, Domenico, I made a mistake. I'll fix it. I'll kill him for you, I swear. You will do nothing. You have one choice. I heard the sound of something sliding across the polished wood of the desk. My heart stopped. On the desk in front of you, Dom said, is your gun. The one I gave you when I made you lieutenant. It has 1 bullet in it. You can choose exile. You walk out that door. You leave the city. You never breathe my air again. You become a ghost, and I never see your face. Or you can choose death. You can use that bullet on yourself. Here. And die with a scrap of honor, saving me the trouble of hunting you. Choose. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. This was his world. This was his justice. I heard Sal sobbing, a desperate, broken sound. You can't do this. Dom, please. We're family. You chose. Dom's voice was final. Exile or death. You have 10 seconds, or Leo will make the choice for you. The seconds ticked by. 1, 2, 3. I'll go, Sal screamed. I'll go, I swear. You'll never see me again. Get out of my house, and Dom whispered. The doors burst open. Sal stumbled out, his face white, tears streaming down his cheeks. He saw me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hatred. He didn't say a word. He just ran. Dom appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of cold, hard control. He looked at me, his gaze unblinking. He didn't apologize for what I'd seen. He didn't explain. He simply accepted it. This was the man I loved. This was the monster he had to be. The phone call came 2 days later. Dom was gone, meeting with his other lieutenants, cleaning up the mess Sal had left. The house was quiet, the new guards watchful. I was in the library, the photograph with the red X sitting on the table in front of me, a constant, ugly reminder. The private line on Dom's desk rang. It never rang unless it was him. I picked it up, my hand trembling. Hello? Silence. Just the faint, electric hum of an open line. Hello, Dom? He's not there, is he, Juliana? The voice. It was smooth as oil, calm, almost amused. My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. My heart seized in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Raymond, I whispered. You sound so surprised, my love, he purred. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? Did you really think you could hide behind this street thug? He'll kill you, I choked out. A low, rich laugh. Will he? He's very good at killing traitors in his own office. But I'm not a fool like Salvatore. I'm everywhere. I'm the man who put that pretty picture in your hand. I'm the man who can walk into his fortress and leave a gift. I'm the man who is watching you right now. I spun around, my eyes scanning the windows, the gardens, nothing. Stop it, what do you want? What do I want? His voice was filled with a sudden, chilling anger. I want what is mine. You are my property. Juliana, you wear my mark. And this, Domenico, he thinks he can just take you? I'm not your property, I screamed, my voice cracking. "You have one chance," he said, his voice dropping to a cold, business-like tone. "One. You walk out of that house. Tonight, you go to the bus station on 8th Avenue. A car will be waiting for you. You come back to me. You beg for my forgiveness, and I will consider letting him live. I will let him keep his worthless city." "And if I don't?" "If you don't," he sighed, as if explaining something to a child, "I will kill him. Not today, not tomorrow, but I will. I'll kill his captains first. I'll kill that old woman who cooks for you. I will bleed him dry. And when he has nothing left, when he is kneeling in the ruins of everything he loves, I will send him your head in a box. Do you understand me?" You're lying." "Am I? I knew about Salvatore. I knew about the girl. I knew about the poison. I know everything, Juliana. You have until midnight. One chance. Don't make me hurt him. He seems to care for you." The line clicked. He was gone. I stood there, the receiver clutched in my hand, my entire body shaking. He was right. He knew everything. He had toyed with Dom. He had sacrificed Sal. He had sent the photo. He was 10 steps ahead of all of us. Dom was a king in his city, but Raymond was a god in the shadows. Dom would not stop. He would hunt him, and Raymond would be waiting. He would lead Dom into a trap, and he would butcher him. I looked at the phone. I looked at the picture. I saw Sal's face, pale with terror. I heard Dom's voice. "I already was one. You just made me want to be something else." He had given me a choice. He had given me my body back. He had given me my life. And I had to protect him. I had to protect him from me. I ran to my room. I didn't pack. I had nothing to pack. Everything I owned was in this house, was from him. My hands were shaking, but not with fear, with a cold, terrible resolve. I tore a piece of paper from the notepad on the desk. I found a pen. My mind was blank. What could I say? "I'm sorry. Thank you. Don't be a fool." I just wrote the truth, the only truth that mattered. "I had to protect you the only way I know how. Don't come for me." I folded the note. I walked into his bedroom, the room where I had finally felt safe. The room smelled like him. I pulled back the comforter and I slid the note under his pillow. I kissed my hand and pressed it to the linen. "I'm sorry, Dom," I whispered. Then I turned and I ran. I slipped out the kitchen door. The guard posted there was new. He was one of the replacements. He was watching the garden, not the house. I didn't look back. I slipped into the shadows of the garden, my feet silent on the grass. I found the break in the hedges I'd seen a week ago, a spot the gardeners hadn't fixed yet. I was out. I was on the street, outside the high, iron gates of the fortress. I was free. And I was walking to my executioner. The bus station on 8th Avenue was a circle of hell I'd never thought I'd see again. It smelled of stale urine, diesel fumes, and hopelessness. It was where I had arrived in this city, a ghost with $20. Now, it was my surrender. Midnight, the last bus to anywhere had just pulled out, leaving the terminal echoing and empty. I stood under a flickering fluorescent light, a girl in borrowed clothes with no luggage and no future. I was a piece of property waiting for collection. The car that pulled up to the curb wasn't a car. It was a shadow, a long, black, impossibly silent sedan with windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. The back door opened. No one got out. I walked toward it, my legs leaden, my note to Dom a burning coal in my memory. "Don't come for me." I slid into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, final thunk, sealing me in. The man in the passenger seat turned. His face was scarred, his eyes empty. I recognized him. His name was Anton, Raymond's head of security, the man who had managed the locks. "You're late," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "I had to walk," I whispered. He just grunted, and the car pulled away from the curb, melting into the city traffic. We drove for over an hour, leaving the glittering lights of the city behind, heading north into the dark, wealthy suburbs. We drove through a set of high, wrought iron gates. identical to the ones I'd slipped through just hours before. But where Doms were a fortress to keep the world out, these were a prison to keep us in. The estate was a sprawling, modern Gothic monstrosity of glass and dark stone. It was a place I knew in my bones. I had scrubbed its floors. I had hidden in its shadows. Anton shoved me from the car. "He's waiting. Don't make him wait any longer." My feet remembered the path, every stone, every step, through the grand, cold foyer, past the silent, terrified faces of other women, other property, who were polishing silver, their eyes downcast. They didn't look at me. Looking was a privilege. Anton led me to the study. It was not like Dom's study, filled with books and history. This room was a monument to ego, black leather, chrome, and a single massive desk. Raymond Corsa sat behind it. He was exactly as I remembered. He wasn't a monster in appearance. He was handsome, in a slick, predatory way. Dark, perfectly styled hair, a suit that cost more than a car, and eyes so pale a blue they were almost white. He was smiling. "Juliana, my love," he purred. Standing, he walked around the desk, his movements fluid. "Welcome home." He stopped in front of me, tilting his head. "You look different, healthier. This thug. He's been feeding you well. I must thank him before I kill him." He reached out, his finger tracing my jawline. The same gesture Dom had made, but this touch was cold. It was the touch of an appraiser. "Did you miss me?" he asked. The lie had to be perfect. The submission had to be absolute. I let the tears I was holding back fall, and I let my body do what it had been trained to do. I let it shake. I was so scared," I choked out, a perfect performance of the victim. He wouldn't let me go. He kept me locked up. I ran as soon as I could." Raymond laughed, a low, rich sound. "You ran? After he got my message? No, my dear. You didn't run. You were returned. Like a lost package, because you know where you belong." He grabbed my chin, his fingers digging in, forcing my head up. His white blue eyes scanned my face. "Did he touch you, Juliana? Did this Valente put his filthy hands on my property?" This was the test. "No," I sobbed. I told him I belonged to you. He was angry. He wanted to, but I didn't let him. I swear." His eyes narrowed, searching for the lie. He wanted to believe it. His ego needed to believe that I was still his, unbroken. "Good," he said, releasing me. He turned, walking back to his desk. "Because I would have had to peel your skin off, but now we can just go back to the way things were. You were my favorite. After all, you were so quiet." I had returned. I was pretending submission, but I wasn't the same girl who had escaped. The girl who had escaped was a terrified animal. The girl who returned, she was a soldier. Dom had taught me about loyalty. He had taught me about silence. But Raymond had taught me about secrets. Raymond's entire empire, his trafficking, his shell corporations, his network of corrupt cops and judges. It was all run from this desk, from the computer sitting on it. When I had escaped the first time, I had managed to steal a small, encrypted USB drive, but I'd had no idea what was on it. I just grabbed it in the panic. Now, I was back, and I wasn't just here to be a sacrifice. I was here to be a saboteur. For the next week, I played the part of the perfect, broken pet. I was silent. I was obedient. I anticipated his needs. I brought him his coffee in the morning and his whiskey at night. I never met his eyes. I slept on a pallet in the corner of his vast, cold bedroom, a symbol of my penance. And every second, I was watching. I watched him type his passwords. I listened to his phone calls. I recorded the names he spoke, the accounts he referenced. I was a ghost again, but this time, I was a ghost with a purpose. I'd stolen a pack of small flash drives from an office supply closet on the second day. I hid them in the one place I knew no one would ever look, inside the hollowed-out heel of a worn-out boot in the back of my old closet. My chance came late one night. Raymond was agitated. He'd been on the phone all day, his voice sharp. "He's still looking," he snarled, slamming the phone down. "This Valente, he's relentless. He's turning over rocks. He's asking questions about my shell corporations. He's getting close." Raymond was arrogant, but not stupid. He was worried. "He'll never find you," I whispered, my voice full of practiced awe. "You're too smart." My words soothed his ego. He smiled, draining his whiskey. "You're right. He's just a dog sniffing at a locked door, and soon I'll put the dog down." He stood, stretching. "I'm going to the city. I have to meet a business associate to calm his nerves. Anton will be here. Don't be stupid." He left. I waited. I counted to 500, my heart hammering. Then I moved. I slipped into his study. The room was dark, the computer asleep. My hands, the ones that used to shake so badly, were rock steady. I sat in his chair. The leather was cold. I typed in the password I'd watched him use a dozen times. My property 77. The computer unlocked. Files, ledgers, bank accounts, names, and pictures. Hundreds of pictures. Girls, women. Some I recognized from the house. Others were just gone. A catalog of his assets. My stomach turned. I shoved one of the tiny USB drives into the port. I didn't know what to copy. I didn't have time. I dragged the entire clients folder. I dragged the accounts ledger. I dragged the shipments file. My hand was on the mouse, dragging the last folder, when I heard the sound. A car on the gravel driveway. He was back. I froze. No, he said he was going to the city. It's a trap. I ripped the drive from the computer. I shoved it down the front of my shirt, the metal cold against my skin. I tried to lock the computer, but I fumbled. The front door of the house slammed open. Juliana, his voice, not the purr, the roar. I ran. I didn't go for the hall. I went for the side door, the one that led to the gardens. I had to get the drive out. I had to hide it. I burst out into the night, my feet slipping on the wet grass. And then the world exploded. Gunfire. Not a pistol. Automatic. A spray of bullets stitched across the stone wall just above my head, showering me with dust. I dropped, curling into a ball, the old familiar instinct. Men were shouting, men I didn't recognize. They were pouring from the trees. They were dressed in black. Tactical gear. Dom? He hadn't listened. He hadn't stayed away. He hadn't come alone. He had brought an army. Raymond had been right. Dom was close. He'd tracked him through the shell corporations. He'd found the house, and he was storming it. Another burst of gunfire. One of Raymond's guards on the patio fell. "Juliana!" That voice. It wasn't Raymond's. It was Dom's. He was here. He was here. "Dom!" I screamed, pushing myself up. I saw him. Across the lawn, he was crouched behind a stone fountain, Leo at his side. He was dressed in black, a pistol in his hand, his face a mask of terrible, beautiful fury. His eyes found mine, and the relief that washed over his face was so profound it buckled my knees. "Move!" he roared. "To me, now!" I ran across the open lawn, my lungs burning, the USB drive digging into my chest. Gunfire was erupting from all sides. It was a war zone. Dom's men were moving, efficient, brutal, taking down Raymond's guards one by one. I was halfway there, 10 more feet. A hand grabbed my hair, yanking me back so hard my neck snapped. I screamed as I was dragged backward, my feet scrambling for purchase. "Going somewhere, my love?" Raymond's voice hissed in my ear. He had come from the house. He had me. One arm locked around my throat, choking me. The other hand pressing the cold, hard muzzle of a pistol to my temple. "Drop it, Valente!" Raymond roared, dragging me into the open. "Or I'll paint the grass with her." The gunfire stopped, all of it. The silence was sudden, deafening. Dom stood up from behind the fountain. He walked out onto the lawn, his pistol held loosely at his side. He was calm, that terrible, cold calm I'd seen in his office. "Let her go, Corsa," Dom said, his voice carrying easily in the night. "Let her go?" Raymond laughed, a high, manic sound. She's mine. You think you can just take what's mine? She has my mark. Did she show it to you? Dom didn't answer, just kept walking, slowly, closing the distance. He was 50 feet away, 40. I asked you a question, you son of a bitch, Raymond screamed, pressing the gun harder into my scalp. I whimpered, my breath catching. Did you enjoy my property? My leftovers? She, Dom said, his voice a low growl, is not property. She is. Raymond was losing it, his arrogance cracking. She came back to me. Didn't you? Juliana, tell him who you belong to. I couldn't breathe. My vision was starting to gray at the edges. Raymond's arm was a steel band across my windpipe. Look at her, Raymond taunted, shaking me. She's so obedient. She knows the rules. She was mine first. Domenico. She was mine in ways you can't even imagine. And she'll be mine when you're dead. Dom stopped. He was 20 feet away, close enough for me to see the muscle ticking in his jaw. His eyes weren't on Raymond. They were on me. He was looking at me, and he wasn't looking with pity. He was looking with expectation. He was waiting. He believed in me. He thought I was something other than a victim. I had one chance. I'd stolen more than a USB drive when I'd been in the kitchen, pretending to be the obedient girl. I'd palmed a knife, a small, thin, wicked-looking paring knife. It was tucked into the waistband of my pants, hidden by my loose shirt. My hand, the one Raymond wasn't watching, moved slowly, millimeter by millimeter. You're pathetic, Corsa, Dom said, his voice cold, drawing Raymond's full attention. You hide behind women. You're a coward. I'm a king, Raymond shrieked. My fingers closed around the handle of the knife. Raymond was focused on Dom, his ego completely engaged. He was a monster, but he was a predictable monster. He had to prove he was better. She's mine, he screamed, his grip tightening. That's when I moved. I didn't try to get away. I didn't try to scream. I grabbed the knife from my waistband and, with all the strength I had, I drove it backward and up. I aimed for his side, for the soft space under his ribs. I felt the blade sink in. Raymond screamed, a high, shocked, inhuman sound. His arm around my throat spasmed, his grip loosening. The gun went off, a deafening explosion next to my ear. The bullet went wild, flying into the dark sky. I dropped to the ground, rolling away, gasping for air. The second shot was not from Raymond's gun. It was a single, flat, definitive crack. I looked up, my ears ringing. Raymond was still standing, his eyes wide with surprise. He looked down at the knife handle protruding from his side. He looked at Dom. A small, dark hole had appeared in the center of his forehead. He didn't fall, he just collapsed. A puppet with its strings cut. He was dead before he hit the grass. Silence. Dom was still standing, his arm outstretched, the pistol smoking in his hand. He looked at Raymond's body. He looked at me, huddled on the grass. His face didn't relax. The fury didn't fade. He just walked toward me, his movements stiff. He reached me. He holstered his pistol. He didn't say a word. He just bent down, slid his arms under me, one under my knees, one behind my back, and lifted me as if I weighed nothing. It's over, he said, his voice rough. The drive, I choked out, my hand fumbling inside my shirt. The evidence, it's all there. His arms tightened around me. Leo, he roared. Leo was at his side, his own gun drawn. Boss. She has evidence, Dom said. Take it. Give it to Antonio. Tell him to make the call. Tell him to burn everything Corsa ever built. I pressed the small, warm USB drive into Leo's hand. He looked at it, then at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect. Go, Dom said. He carried me across the lawn, past the bodies, past the gunfire, which had started up again as his men cleared the house. He didn't run. He walked, a king leaving a battlefield. I was bleeding. My ear was ringing. I was shaking from head to toe. but he had me. He carried me to his car, a black armored SUV, and set me in the passenger seat. He got in, started the engine, and drove. He tore out of the compound, leaving the chaos and the death behind us. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. The adrenaline was a fire in my veins. I was alive. He was alive. Then, as the lights of the city appeared on the horizon, the fire went out. It left me cold, so cold. The shaking started, not the small tremor of fear, but a bone-rattling, violent quake, the night, the blood, the sound of the gun, the smell of Raymond's cologne. It all came crashing in. "Dom," I whispered. "I've got you," he said, his hand leaving the wheel to grip my knee. I can't. I wasn't just shaking, I was shattering. We got back to the estate. He half carried me inside. Sophia was there, her face a mask of tears and relief. "Get him out," Dom had whispered to me, his voice raw. "That was your job. My job was to make sure you had a home to come back to." He got me to his room. I was still in the clothes I'd run in, spattered with Raymond's blood. I stood in the center of the room, and then my body just gave up. The trauma, the poison, the fear, the fight, it all demanded payment at once. My legs buckled. My vision went black. I didn't faint. I collapsed, a dead weight into the darkness. When I woke up, I was in his bed. I was in a clean t-shirt. The sun was streaming through the windows. The house was silent. I turned my head. Dom was sitting in the leather chair in the corner. He was unshaven, his eyes bruised with exhaustion. He was in the same black clothes from the raid, stained and rumpled. He hadn't slept. He had been sitting there, watching me. He saw my eyes open. He stood, his joints stiff, and came to the bedside. He sat on the edge, his weight a comforting presence. He looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. "You're safe," he said, his voice hoarse. "How long?" "A day. You've been asleep for a day. My doctor, he gave you a sedative. Said it was exhaustion, trauma." He reached out, his hand covering mine on the comforter. "You're safe, Juliana." "You came for me," I whispered, the tears welling, hot. "I told you not to." "You're a bad liar," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And you're a worse strategist. You don't send a soldier to his death and tell him not to fight." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. I could feel the tremor in his hands. He had been just as scared as I was. "It's over," he whispered, his voice thick with a promise that was more sacred than any vow. "It's all over. You're home." His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. "You're mine now. No one touches you again." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my entire life, I believed it. The news started filtering in the next day. The authorities, acting on an anonymous tip, had raided a dozen of Raymond Corsa's properties. They had found his ledgers, his accounts, his assets. Dozens of women, some who had been missing for years, were freed. The Corsa empire, the one that had stood for a generation, was decapitated. It crumbled to dust overnight. My name was never mentioned. The reports called me a confidential informant, a victim who escaped. Dom had made sure of it. He had burned the world, but he had protected me from the ashes. I was Juliana Hart, a ghost, a survivor, and I was, finally, free. The silence that fell over the estate in the weeks after the raid was almost as unnerving as the violence had been. The extra guards were gone. The tactical vehicles had vanished, and the house had returned to its state of opulent, heavy quiet. But it was a different quiet. It was no longer a prison. It was a sanctuary. My body healed first. The bruises faded. The ringing in my ears stopped. The rest of it, that was slower. The nightmares didn't stop. They just changed. I no longer dreamed of Raymond's cold, white-blue eyes. Instead, I dreamed of the gunshot. I would see his body collapsing over and over, and I would wake up, my heart hammering, my hands clenched, the ghost of the knife in my grip. And every time, Dom was there. He wouldn't be asleep. He'd be sitting in the chair by the window, watching me, as if he knew. He would come to the bed, sit on the edge, and just take my hand. He wouldn't speak. He would just hold it, his thumb stroking my knuckles, until my breathing evened out and the shaking stopped. He was my anchor. He was the wall that kept the ghosts at bay. After the first week, he came into the library, where I was aimlessly staring at a page I hadn't read. "This," he said, his voice quiet, "is not enough." "What do you mean?" "I can kill the man. I can tear down his house, but I can't touch the shadows. I can't fight what's in your head." I flinched. He was right. I was safe, but I wasn't free. "I've made an appointment," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "with a woman, a doctor. Her name is Alessi. She helps people who have seen things, who have been through what you've been through." I stared at him. A therapist. This man, this Sicilian mafia boss, whose world was built on violence and silence, was sending me to a therapist. "She will come here," he added, as if sensing my panic at leaving. "Tomorrow. You will just talk, and if you don't like her, I will find someone else." Doctor. Alessi was a small, sharp, kind woman in her 50s. She wasn't afraid of Dom, which was the first thing I liked about her. She would arrive twice a week, and we would sit in the garden, and I would talk. I told her about the room. I told her about the fear. I told her about the crash of the pan in the kitchen, and the way I had cowered, and I told her about the night of the raid, about the knife, about the feeling of the blade sinking in. "You are grieving, Juliana," she told me, her hands folded in her lap. "You are grieving the girl you were, and you are processing the woman you had to become to survive." Slowly, with Dom's unwavering, silent support and Dr. Alessi's careful guidance, the shadows began to recede. The nightmares didn't vanish, but they lost their power. The shaking in my hands stopped. I started to sleep through the night. I started to laugh at Sophia's dry, witty comments in the kitchen. I started to feel human. About a month after the raid, Dom found me in the library, pacing. I was restless. The house was safe, but it was still a cage. He watched me for a moment, a small, unreadable smile on his face. "You need the sun," he said. "What?" "You're pacing like a panther. This house, it served its purpose. It kept you safe. Now, it's just a house." He walked over to me. "I have a place. In California. A small villa on the coast. No one knows I own it. It's quiet. Just the water." "California?" The word sounded foreign. Impossible. "Just for a few weeks," and he said, "No guards, no captains, just you and me and the ocean. What do you say?" I looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous man who had torn the world apart for me, and who was now offering me something even more precious. Peace. "Yes," I whispered. "I'd like that." The villa was nothing like his estate. His house in the city was a fortress of dark wood and stone, built to intimidate. This place was built to disappear. It was all glass and white walls, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The air was warm and smelled of salt and flowers. There were no guards. There were no locks on the inside doors. There was just the sound of the waves, a constant, soothing rhythm. We were, for the first time, just Dom and Juliana. On the second night, we walked down the private wooden steps to the beach. The sun was setting, a massive, bleeding orb of orange and violet that set the ocean on fire. We walked in silence. Our shoes left on the steps, the cool, wet sand clinging to our bare feet. He was wearing a simple linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up, his usual armor of expensive suits gone. I was in a simple sundress, my hair loose in the salty wind. He found my hand, his fingers lacing with mine, and we just walked. "I have to ask you something," I said, my voice small against the roar of the surf. He stopped, turning to face me. The setting sun cast his face in shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. "Anything." "The night of the raid, Corsa, Raymond, he taunted you. He said horrible things about me being about leftovers. I looked down, the shame a familiar, cold stone in my stomach. You didn't know if I was lying. You didn't know what I had to do to survive. You didn't know if I'd been with him to save my own life. I looked up, meeting his dark, patient eyes. But you came anyway. You walked onto that lawn. You faced him. Why? Why did you fight so hard for me, Dom? Why risk everything for a girl you barely knew? A girl who was damaged? He didn't answer for a long time. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. The wind whipped his dark hair across his forehead. "Do you remember the night you dropped the pan in the kitchen?" he finally asked, his voice low and rough. I flinched at the memory. "Yes, I cowered. I thought you were going to hit me." "No," he said, his grip on my hand tightening. "That's not what I saw. I saw you curl up. Yes, I saw you terrified. But you weren't afraid of me. You were afraid of the man you were remembering. You were afraid of the ghost. And I've spent my entire life being the ghost, the monster, the man people cower from." He took a step closer, his other hand coming up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. "'Cause you were the only one," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Whoever looked at me like I wasn't a monster." He leaned his forehead against mine. "You were the first good thing I'd seen in forever. You were terrified and bruised and a terrible liar. But you weren't broken. You were just lost. I didn't save you. Juliana, you saved me. I was just a boss. You made me a man. That's why I fought. I wasn't fighting for you. I was fighting for us." The tears that came were not tears of fear or grief. They were tears of release. I wrapped my arms around his neck, and he lifted me off my feet, his arms locking around my waist, holding me against him as the last sliver of sun disappeared into the ocean. We went back to the villa. The night was warm, and the glass doors were open, letting the sound of the ocean fill the room. He lit a few candles, their light soft and flickering. He found an old record player in the corner and put on some soft, instrumental music, something with a slow, swaying rhythm. He walked over to me, holding out his hand. "May I?" I smiled, my heart so full I thought it might burst. I placed my hand in his. He pulled me close, one hand on the small of my back, the other holding mine. It wasn't the desperate, claiming kiss from his study. It wasn't the healing, reclaiming passion of our nights in his fortress. This was different. This was peace. We slow danced on the hardwood floor, the candlelight making shadows play on the walls. We didn't talk. We just moved together. Two halves of a whole, my head resting on his chest, his chin resting on my hair. I could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath my ear. It was the only sound in the world that mattered. He held me, and we danced, and the promises were not spoken. They were in the way his hand tightened on my back. They were in the way I leaned my full weight against him. A perfect, unspoken trust. They were murmured against each other's skin. A language of touch, of safety, of forever. That night, in that house of glass by the sea, there were no nightmares. There was only the sound of the waves and the steady breathing of the man who had become my entire world. We returned to the city 2 weeks later, and I was not the same woman who had left. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, solid confidence. But I was still restless. The women Raymond had kept, the ones who had been freed. I couldn't stop thinking about them. I had escaped. I had been saved. They just had the authorities. I started to research, using the laptop Dom had given me. I found a small, struggling nonprofit in a quiet part of the city. It was a shelter, a safe house for women who had escaped trafficking. They offered therapy, job training, a fresh start. I went to Dom. He was in his study, back in his suit, the boss. "I want to work," I said. He looked up, his brow furrowed. "Work at Luca's? You don't have to. Juliana, you own half of it now. Anyway." "No," I said, shaking my head. I slid a brochure for the shelter across his desk. "I want to work here. I want to help them. I know what they're going through. I can talk to them." He picked up the brochure. His expression darkened. I saw the protector rise up, the man who wanted to wrap me in silk and keep me in the fortress. "It's dangerous, Tsar," he said, his voice flat. "These are damaged women, angry, scared, and the men who lost them." "I'm not made of glass. Dom," I said, my voice firm. "You didn't save me so I could become a doll. You saved me so I could live, and this is living. I need to do this." He studied me, his eyes searching my face. He saw the resolve. He saw that I was no longer the girl who cowered. He nodded. "Once. All right, but you take a car, you take a guard, and you use a different name." I smiled. I was thinking, Julie Hart. He made a phone call the next day. A few hours later, the shelter received an anonymous donation, enough to keep them running for the next 10 years. I started work the following week. It was hard. It was draining. I listened to stories that broke my heart, but for every story of terror, there was a moment of hope. A woman who laughed for the first time, a girl who learned to read. And I was good at it. I was patient. I was quiet. And when a girl would wake up screaming from a nightmare, I knew exactly what to do. I would just sit with her, hold her hand, and be her anchor until the storm passed. After 3 months of this, I was sitting with Dom on the balcony, watching the city lights. I was home. I was safe. I had a purpose. But there was one last piece. "I don't want to be hidden anymore," I said, my voice quiet. He turned to me. "What do you mean? At the shelter?" "No, in your life. Your men. They call me Juliana. They treat me with respect, but I'm still the ghost. The girl you saved. I don't want to be your protected secret. I want to stand next to you, not behind you." Dom was silent for a long time. He looked out over his city. "That world, Juliana. It's ugly. It's not just meetings and restaurants. It's brutal. I've kept you separate from that." "You didn't keep me separate from Raymond," I countered softly. "You didn't hide me from Sal. I've seen the monster. Dom, I'm not afraid of it, and I'm not afraid of your men." He looked at me, and a slow, proud smile spread across his face. It was the first genuine, unguarded smile I had ever seen from him. It transformed him. "Then they should see you," he said. He called a meeting the next night, not just his captains, all his lieutenants, the same men from the night Sal was exposed. He had me stand at his side, my hand in his, in front of his desk. The room was full, the air thick with tension and curiosity. Leo was in the front row, and he looked at me, his face unreadable, but his eyes held the respect I'd seen the night of the raid. "For the last few months," Dom began, his voice a low, commanding rumble, "there has been speculation about my guest, about the war with the Corsa family, about her." He lifted our joined hands. "Let me be clear," he said, his eyes sweeping the room, meeting every man's gaze. "This is Juliana. She's not my guest. She's not just under my protection. She's my partner. She's my future. She's the reason you are all still breathing, and the Corsa family is not." The room was dead silent. "From this day forward," Dom's voice was absolute, "she is a Valente. An insult to her is an insult to me. A threat to her is a threat to this entire family. You will treat her with the same respect you give me. You will give her your loyalty, and you will give her your silence. Are we understood?" There was a collective murmur. "Yes, boss." Dom held their gaze for a long second, then nodded. "Good, get out." The men filed out, one by one. As Leo passed, he paused. He looked at me, then at Dom. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Boss, Juliana, a good night." He was the first. The rest would follow. I wasn't just Dom's woman. I was their boss. A week later, a package arrived. It was delivered by a man I didn't recognize. It was for Dom. He opened it in his study, and I saw him frown. "What is this?" It was from a rival family, the D'Angelos, a family his father had feuded with for years. "It's a peace offering," Dom said, his voice laced with suspicion. Inside, there was no note, just an old, faded photograph in a simple silver frame. Dom stared at it, his brow furrowed. That's my father, when he was a young man. He was right. A younger, happier version of Dom stood next to another man, both of them in old-fashioned suits, shaking hands. But it wasn't the men who held my attention. Standing just behind Dom's father, smiling, was a young woman with a familiar, kind face and dark, wavy hair. My breath caught. I took the photo from his hands. Dom... What is it? This woman, I whispered, my finger trembling as I traced her face. This is my mother. He stared at me. What? That's impossible. It's her. I have a picture of her. This is her when she was in her 20s. Who is this man, her husband? Dom looked closer. No, that's Angelo D'Angelo, the man my father feuded with, but they're shaking hands, and your mother, she's with him? A note had been tucked behind the photo. Dom pulled it out. Domenico, our fathers had a war, but for one brief, shining moment, they had a peace. This woman, she brokered it. She saved your father's life from a Corsa bullet, and our fathers put down their guns. The peace didn't last, but it happened. It seems fate has decided to give our families a second chance. Let's not waste it. We stared at the photo. My mother, his father, their paths had crossed decades ago. A peace, brokered by her. A life, saved by her. Fate, I whispered. No. Dom said, pulling me against his side, his arm locking around my waist. Not fate. He kissed the top of my head. Just inevitable. Luca's trattoria was buzzing. It was 8 o'clock on a Friday night. The lights were low and golden, and the air smelled of garlic and wine. A couple came through the door, looking for their table. Good evening, I said, smiling. Welcome to Luca's. Do you have a reservation? I wasn't in a black uniform. I was in a simple, elegant, dark green dress. The reservation book held easily in my hand. I was no longer the girl with the trembling hands. I was the woman who owned the room. Heart, the man said. Party of 2. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, right this way? I led them to their table, the one by the window. I poured their water myself. My hand rock steady. Your waiter will be with you in a moment. Enjoy your dinner. I turned and my eyes scanned the room I now co-owned. My room. And I saw him. He was in the corner booth, his table. He was in a dark, impeccable suit, the light glittering off his expensive watch. He wasn't talking to his captains. He wasn't reading a paper. He was just watching me. His face was no longer the mask of cold, hard control. It was softened. The edges were gone. His eyes, once so dark and analytical, were filled with a quiet, possessive, and profound warmth. He was no longer the man shouting threats in a dark room. He was the man silently protecting the only thing that ever made him want to be something else. He raised his glass to me, a silent toast. I smiled, my heart full, and I turned to greet the next guest. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey with Juliana and Dom. It means the world to me that you spent your time here. I would love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of love and danger. And finally, please share your thoughts on this story in the comments. Your feedback is what helps me create more stories just like this. Thank you again.